Hanging with Higgins, where author and former prosecutor John J. Higgins interviews his intriguing guests about their lives, knowledge, experiences, and projects. Explore, learn, and be entertained. Come, join us now. Good evening, and welcome to Hanging with Higgins. I'm your host, John J. Higgins. Tonight, I have a fellow authoress who has written and self-published her first book, entitled Call It Fate. I'm going to have her share her experience of becoming an author, what it took for her to write what will be a trilogy, and how she went about taking the self-published route. From what I can see, she is developing her social media persona and can be found at www.elizabethwyke.com. That's ELIZABETHWYKE.com. She is also on Facebook, Goodreads, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, and Amazon. From the bio you sent me, Lizzie I can call you, correct?
Absolutely. Please do.
It seems that you're a Colorado girl raised in Oklahoma. That reminds me of Steve Martin's King Tut song, Born in Arizona, Moved to Babylonia. And now you're an avowed Oklahomian, or is it an Oklahomian net?
Well, okay, so the affectionate title that we give ourselves here in Oklahoma, we call ourselves Okies. And you're welcome to call me an Okie. And it's, like that Merle Haggard song, even though I'm not from Muskogee, I'm definitely proud to be an Okie.
Okay, that's very cool.
Yeah, that's it.
So, I guess, how old were you when you moved?
I moved here when I was 12 to Oklahoma.
Okay.
So, it's pretty much home to me now. I have memories from Colorado, but most of my memories are from here. So this is definitely home.
Where in Colorado did you come from?
Colorado Springs, mostly. Pikes Peak area. Real beautiful.
It is beautiful. Mm-hmm. Actually, I have a funny story. I was up in, I had a brand new 240Z sports car when I was around 19, and I drove up to Colorado, and I was up in Cripple Creek where you could see Pikes Peak in the first couple of days of August. And when I got up there, I got iced in, actually.
Yeah, I believe it.
On all the roads. President Nixon was president when I went up in the mountain, and he was no longer president when I came down. It was like an earth-changing, world-changing event when I was there.
I believe it.
Beautiful country, for sure. So could you tell us what growing up was like for you? Well,
I was definitely an introvert growing up. 100% wallflower in large groups. And somewhere along the way, I sort of found myself. And I'm much more extroverted now, and I absolutely love connecting with new people. And that truly is one of the most happy, unexpected surprises, through this whole journey, is all the connections that I've made with new friends and just the whole writing community and the blogging community that goes hand in hand with the writing. I've met some wonderful people. You as well. So it's great. It's great. But growing up, go for it.
Writing is somewhat of a, at least for me, it's kind of I don't want to say it's an isolating experience, but it's like a solitary experience.
Absolutely.
And so, it's kind of a change when you've got to go from the writing piece to the promoting piece.
Right.
And so you have to have both kinds of parts to your personality in order to make that work.
I'm very comfortable being alone. I can lock myself in a writing cave for days on end and be perfectly fine, perfectly happy, no problem. But then I have to mentally shift, like you said, and be, okay, so now there's people in my world again, not just characters. There's actual real life human beings. And I'm supposed to communicate with them. So let's get that
right. I have to speak. I have to speak out loud.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a mental shift there.
So now you went to high school and then you go to college? What did you do?
Well, I actually got married pretty much right out of high school. My husband and I married at 19. And so I had started college. I really was just going to go. I hadn't decided what I wanted to do with my life at the time, and so I was just taking all those classes just to go. And after my husband and I got married so young, I decided, financially speaking, since I don't really have a direction to go, let's just put college on the back burner. Naturally, the back burner became the forever back burner, and I never went back, per se, which I'm okay with. But I ended up working a couple different industries, really. I was teaching some high school math at a small private school that didn't require a college education to teach. Go figure. Okay. But it worked for me. And I was also in management in a bookstore for a number of years before we started, we had children. Once the babies came along, I decided, I still need to produce a full-time income. Today's economy, both people need to work, right? Yeah. So, but I was one of those moms that couldn't let go of my babies. I couldn't just put them in daycare and then pick them up at the end of the day and be okay with it. So I decided to become the daycare. I became a child care provider and started watching children in my home so that way I could be a mom, when the kids are little and still work. So it's been really rewarding. Definitely challenging at times, but, I'm really pleased with it. I love doing it.
Well, I often think that most people at 18 aren't really equipped to start making lifelong decisions in terms of what they're going to do for a career.
Right.
I was a resident advisor at Rutgers for a couple of years as I was doing my undergrad work. And I went through one semester of college in Miami, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I had 48 credits. And it was like I really had to make, decisions, so I pulled out, and I worked in industry for a while.
Yeah.
It's like I fed up with that. But, I really think that, I have a cousin whose daughter, she took a time the first year after high school off and flew to South Africa. And she was working with monkeys and whatever there for the one semester, and then she went to one of the South American countries, I'm not positive which one, and she was helping to teach English there. And now she's going off to college because she's had some experiences under her belt to try to help her, make that decision. So, but I really admire you for working for little kids. I had to watch my nephew the one time when he was about 3 or 4, and oh my God, I tried everything to exhaust that kid. And of course, my place was never baby-proofed, and it was like whatever it was that he was headed for was really dangerous.
Absolutely.
So finally, at the end of the day, we all got together, my cousins and my sister and whatever, and there were finally 5 adults sitting with him. And then I went, phew, we're finally evenly matched.
5-1.
So how many kids? Yeah. How many kids do you watch at a clip?
5-1. It's just the reverse.
Well, you must be pretty amazing.
We'll go with that. Sure. I definitely have my days. I think, have I truly lost my mind? What am I doing? But at the end of the day, it's just rewarding and it's fun. We dance and we be silly, and it just makes the day go by pretty fast.
I always figured nap time was more for the adult than for the child.
Oh, it is, though. It is, because you need, I need those kids to nap so I can have a break. So it's totally for me. It's not for them. It's for me. I need a break. That's what it is.
So now, did you always write?
I've always loved creative writing. Through school, I would sit down and I would write. I took some creative writing classes, high school and that kind of thing. And I've always been, I call myself an avid natural daydreamer. I've always created stories in my mind, and then sometimes I would think, oh, I should write that down. That's pretty good stuff. I'd write it down. And so, I loved writing when I was younger. And then I grew up and I sort of lost it along the way. Life's responsibilities took me other places, and once I became a mother, and I would say that most mothers would sympathize with me, that you start giving yourself and giving yourself and giving. Your whole day is giving to these little people that require 100% of your attention. And at the end of the day, you think, wow, what on earth did I do for me? Your whole, and not that that's a bad thing. I mean, there's only a short time that your kids are little, and I don't take that for granted, but I realized pretty quick that for my own, sense of self, I needed a hobby. I needed something to do for me. And I decided, I always loved writing. So let me give that a shot again. And speaking with my mom about it, she and I are really close, and it was her idea. She's like, well, why don't you take some writing classes? You can find them online. You can do them, in your own time. And sure enough, we actually found a wonderful website that offered affordable creative writing courses. And so I took some creative writing courses for me, and I just started writing and relearning how to write, what to do and that kind of thing. So, and that was just the start of it. It relit a fire within me, a passion that I had neglected for years. Just recalled back to my memory how much I enjoy it and just really come alive when I can just sit down and write.
Right, right. Well, I think for certain people it does serve that kind of purpose. I know it's almost like a meditative Zen-like experience for me.
Yeah.
And when I'm not writing, creatively, because I end up writing every day about something or other, but it's not the same.
Right.
It just doesn't give you that kind of reward. Where you're constructing something out of nothing.
That's exactly it.
So, and that's the other great thing today in the world with the computers and the internet is you can take these courses so easily. It's not.
Right.
I tried I went to law school at night actually, and that was a nightmare because 120 miles a day back and forth.
Oh God.
So yeah, but I don't think you can do law school online. I don't think that would work well. But that kills you just in terms of getting back and forth, much less whatever the schoolwork is.
No kidding.
So you started working on something.
Right. Through the writing courses, I remember specifically the very first writing assignment that was given to me in the very first writing course that I took through this online creative writing, program. And the homework at the end of that first course, or at the end of the very first assignment, said to create a character who has to go to the library for a specific book. Only the librarian will not let your character have it. Then you're supposed to set a timer for 15 minutes. When the timer goes off, you can be done, or you can keep writing. And I just happened to keep writing. Something in that writing sprint, right, that short little 15-minute window, sparked this entire story in my mind. And that was the start of what's now my book. So it's really special to me that, I'll never forget that first assignment.
Well, it also amazes me what that spark is that will get somebody on a track that they'll write whatever novel that they do write. My stuff is about the archangels and the war for heaven. And I got into that because I was looking all over to try to find the book that had what I'll call Luciferel's war in heaven, because I knew the story from, Catholic school, I think. I was a little kid. And everywhere I looked, I could not find that story anywhere. And the only thing I found that was close was John Milton's Paradise Lost, which is basically unreadable to a modern reader. Wow. I can read Shakespeare. I could read German in German, at some point in my life. So I'm pretty good at deciphering, but it was just really tough. And And I think the thing that kind of threw me over the edge on the whole thing was when he had the angels using cannons in heaven. It was like, they're not going to be using cannons, you know. I mean, that just doesn't fly. Yeah, it just doesn't fly. You know, they're creatures of light. What do they care about a cannonball?
That's it.
So that's how I really started writing my own stuff. And, you know, and and I don't know if this happened for you, but for me, there was a lot of synchronicity that started falling into place when I started writing. It would be, I would be thinking about something and something would pop on TV, or there'd be even a song on the radio. One of my characters is Lilith. She was the first woman in one of the Hebrew myths that seems to be missing out of Genesis. And I get in the car, I turn on the radio, I had Sirius XM, I had it disconnected in the car. I just connected it, and the first song on there was about Lilith. And the disc jockey goes, "The only Lilith I've ever heard of is the one out of the TV series Cheers or Frasier, who was his wife or girlfriend." And I'm going, "Oh no, that's not the only one." Right. Yeah. So it was like, and to me, it was like, what are the odds, you know, of that kind of thing happening?
Yeah.
So have you had any experiences like that where
absolutely.
things just fell into place?
Absolutely. Well, you know, in the back of your mind constantly, for me, is the story that I'm writing. Every little thing in life can somehow fit into that story, you know, or a new story. Sometimes I'll just hear, you know, a lyric or a sentence or a phrase and think, oh, that's so cool. Well, I'm going to write about that. You know, and I'll sit down and I'll just start writing, and then another story is in place, or I'll fit it into some way or another the story that I'm working on, because everything in the world relates to what I'm working on right now. Yeah, absolutely. I have that all the time.
And I also had experiences where I'd get stuck, and I couldn't figure out where to go.
Right.
And you know, it'd be like I'd wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I go, this is what I need to do here, you know, or I need to stop it there and then move over to something else. So,
you know, writing for me sometimes is like a faucet. I'll get stuck and I'll think, and there was times when writing this book, I just set it aside for days or weeks, which was dangerous to do, but I would just set it aside. And then one day I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to write. So I'd bring it all back up. I'd read over the last bit that I wrote, and I'd just start writing again. And like that faucet, once you turn the water on, guess what?
It was ready to flow.
That's it. And so the cool thing about that is that, you know, you never really know where it's going to go. You never really know where it's going to take you. And that's sometimes the exciting journey is once you really get in that train of thought, and it just takes you places that you didn't think that it was even going to go. And then all of a sudden you're on a whole other path. You think, oh, yeah, that's where it's supposed to go all along, of course. Right.
Yeah.
So it's great.
Like I often say is that once I get the characters straight in my mind, the scenario, the characters basically write what they're going to say,
don't they?
And how things are going to flow, because the personality will react in a certain way.
Right.
And when you have multiple personalities in a scene, then they kind of play off one another. And that's what I think is so enjoyable about that creative process. You know, I don't know if people outside of that really have that. You know, because most of my life, again, it was very strict in terms of what I did, factual and whatever. So you never could enjoy that kind of sideline or whatever. Right. And, you know, the story to me is always fast. In other words, if I don't enjoy the story as I'm writing it, well, then I figure it's not worth writing.
Absolutely. And don't you feel like sometimes you can, you know, writing in these different characters allows you to sort of live different lives, you know, while you're you, but then you're also all these other characters.
Absolutely.
And that's so much fun. You get to be whoever you want to be in your book.
Well, it was funny. My girlfriend's one of her sisters said, I know who you are. You're Jeremiel. And I said, yeah, but I'm also Luciferel and Samuel and Lilith and Adam and the Almighty. And
right.
they didn't come in here and do something different.
True.
It is. It's all facets, kind of the personality.
Yeah.
The other thing I love about writing, because at times, I wish I had gone into filmmaking or whatever, but when you write, you create the entire thing.
Yeah.
You don't need somebody else to move this for you or whatever. You can do it all in one shot.
Right.
Now, you're writing what you call sci-fi romance.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the genres kind of throw me off a lot
Sure.
of times, so maybe you can kind of explain what that all means.
Well, and I'll tell you, it's more than that. It's a new adult sci-fi romance. So there's one more genre to throw at you. So
Okay.
The new adult phase is kind of big right now in the romance genre. It's a big time player as a subgenre, and that would be, what it does is it bridges the gap between a young adult to the adult, contemporary adult fiction. And it's so mostly in the new adult genre, you'll find the characters are in college, kind of that young 20s, 19 to 20, 22, 23, kind of that phase of life.
Okay.
The sci-fi part is aliens. That's it. Much like, for example, the Twilight was a human vampire love story. This is a human alien love story. So think Clark Kent with Lois Lane. It's not like slimy green Martian, type alien. Nothing like that. No, this is much sexier than that. So it's a human alien love story. That's it.
Well, I have a human archangel love story.
There you go.
I guess they're all kind of. Yeah.
Right.
When you were saying that about Alien, the first thing that popped in my head was that movie with Mars Attacks, with those little green guys going.
No green guys. There's no green guys in this at all. Not one.
Well, that's very cool, and also that's part of my problem with all these genres, because I think a lot of stuff crosses a lot of the lines. I don't know that you can neatly just package something into one kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So it's good that everything is expanding like that.
Yeah. I kind of struggled at first because, I wasn't really sure how to really go back. Because a lot of the sci-fi anymore has to, when you think sci-fi, what do you think? You think the little green Martians running around like you said. And so I almost don't want to stereotype it like that, but then it's not necessarily a fantasy. It's not necessarily paranormal. So I just call it what it is,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that was cool what you just said about Superman being an alien.
Yeah.
Because it's not the way, I would normally think of that.
Exactly.
It's very true.
Right.
Comes from planet Krypton.
That's it.
So now, how did you get to the point that you were deciding it was going to be a trilogy?
Well, I finished writing Call It Fate, and it was a stopping point as far as the right length for a novel.
Okay.
But I'm not done. I wasn't ready to be done with these characters that I created. I wasn't ready to be done with the storyline. I just wanted to keep going, and I had, the idea I still want to write about this part of their journey. And so, this second installment will be titled Call It Destiny, and it'll be the next, chapter of this journey that they're on. And then the third installment, what'll wrap up the trilogy. Well, I'm going to have to be real creative in my structure of that. Maybe do some research, because there'll be a lot of backstory tied in to help. Because there'll be that's the way to put it. There'll be a lot of backstory while also continuing on with the end. The ending.
Do you have the ending in mind already?
Oh, of course.
Oh, okay.
Of course.
Because some people don't.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was writing mine, I was going to write a trilogy, and it was going to be the Archangel Jeremiel and the War to Conquer Heaven, and then there would have been the one where it moved into Hell, and then lastly it resolved on the Earth. And when I wrote, I thought I had written 400 and some odd pages, and when I was getting ready to submit it, I had to move it into the right format.
Right.
Well, the thing doubled. It was like 770 pages long.
Wow.
So, I had a couple of publishers that were interested in it. One wanted it as it was, and then another one said, well, we really love the story, but we need it in smaller volumes.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can break it down, it was easy to pluck 1 and 2 out, but to make 3 balanced, I had to write another 200 pages.
Right.
So, like where I am now is a book 4 is with the publisher, because then it's going to go through hell, and there'll probably be there will be 3 books in that sequence, and probably 3 in the last.
Wow.
I know where my ending is,
Uh-huh.
and everything that's moving and swimming together now
Mm-hmm.
will all come together at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And 'cause that's the stuff that always fascinates me, is that I like to have a lot going on.
Yeah. Right.
So, I mean, will you reconsider making it longer if it makes sense at the time, or?
Possibly. When I started out with Call It Fate, I didn't have direction at all. There was a quote that I heard, and I'm going to read it to you. I wrote it down because it's a good one, and it really resonated with me during the writing of Call It Fate. It gave me that realization that, oh, I'm not the only one who writes like this. Okay, so here's the quote. It's from E.L. Doctorow. He said, "Writing a novel is like driving a car at night. You can see only as far as your headlights, but you can make the whole trip that way." And that was it for me. That was it for Call It Fate. I knew, a couple of steps ahead, and then I get there, and I think, okay, now I know the next little piece, and I get there. And then, during the writing of Call It Fate, I didn't have the ending set in place. I didn't know where I was going.
Right.
Once it was all said and done, and I had it all mapped out, then I was able to go back and drop in those tidbits, plant the pieces to make it all fit together. And so that was the writing of Call It Fate. Now we'll call it Destiny. I have the whole thing plotted out. And so I know where I'm going piece by piece. I know how each dot connects to the next. But, while still allowing myself a freedom to deviate here and there as it progresses. But seems to be coming together quicker, which is good. Hey, plots help. Go figure. Yeah.
Well, I know that there's always been that, and I think you had mentioned that in some of our emails back and forth, that it's the plotters versus the plantsters or something is what you called it.
I heard that term, the plotster versus the pantster, and the pantster was me with Call It Fate, and that's because I wrote by the seat of my pants. It's just as it came to me, I threw it out there, and then the plotster approach would be the ones who map out. They, this point A connects to point B, which connects to point C, and on and on. So.
Yeah. Well, I know for myself, sometimes I'd be stuck where, I'd have one set of characters in the one storyline, and I was having trouble for whatever reason moving that one forward.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just put that aside, and rather than write chapter 13 or 14, I was then writing what would become chapter 50.
Yeah.
Because it was like that was what was coming to me.
Uh-huh.
And then at the end, then of course there's that conglomeration kind of thing of gluing it together
Yep.
and making it all kind of flow.
Mm-hmm.
I was never very good at just outlining everything. I just need to have a certain amount of understanding of where I'm going.
Right.
I love that quote about the, as far as the headlights.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said before, sometimes as you're writing, all of a sudden there's a twist that comes to you that goes, oh, you know what, that is much better than what I was thinking before.
Yeah, I had those eureka moments. Like, oh, yeah, that's it. And then your fingers just go, so fast you have typos everywhere, but that's it.
I'm a two-finger typist. I don't know how I've done it all these years, and thank God for spell check and all that. I can spell anything, but my fingers sometimes get a little excited.
Yeah.
And one wants to move in front of the other, and they just kind of do all that. And now, when you were writing, did you do any background research? because you were talking about a library, did you need to go to a place to get that in your mind, or were you able to create that solely in your head?
I created it. The story takes place at the University of Arizona, of all places. So it's in Tucson, and I
went there, by the way.
Did you? Okay. So keep in mind, I did not.
It's many years ago, so beautiful college, though.
Yeah, well, I did some research online, just a little bit here and there, just to kind of get it into my vision in my head. But I didn't necessarily, I was like, this is a sci-fi book. I mean, none of it is factual anyway. It's purely just for, hey, enjoyment, And so, yeah, I just created it.
Yeah.
So probably University of Arizona students, if they read it, they'll think, this is so not right. But neither is the part of the aliens, so that's okay.
Yeah, right. Well, I used this story with another radio show. It was on one of my own, actually. Part of what I did was we were the people who invented drug-free school zones.
Right.
And in doing that, we were trying to educate young people in terms of what it was and whatever. So I did these massive public awareness campaigns in New Jersey, printing millions of documents and sending them home individualized to every kid. It was a night. We had this comic book that we had done with a dinosaur character in a cop car with this brontosaurus, the big head sticking out with the hat and whatever. I print up like 670,000 of the 1K to 3 and 500,000 for 4 to 6 because it matched the school population.
Wow.
And 2 years later, I had this crime prevention officer come in, and he goes to me, "You cannot release this." And I'm going, "I've already released it."
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. So he goes, "The way that dinosaur's got its head out the window, there's no way that a police officer would be looking like that, and you're giving the wrong impression to the public." And I'm like, oh, my God, is this all you have to do with your time?
Yeah, no kidding.
It's a dinosaur.
It's dinosaur, for crying out loud.
So some people just don't have a good sense of humor, I think, or have that kind of creative piece,
yeah,
you know?
That's it.
So now when you were writing, I guess you just started writing and going that way. You were never intimidated by the length of anything, or?
Not with that book, because truth be told, the whole writing process was just for me. It was a hobby. I needed an escape, something to do at night when the kids were in bed, and, my husband is in school at night, so I had a quiet house, and I needed something to do. And it wasn't until the end of it I realized, wow, that's a whole novel. I actually wrote a novel. So it wasn't intimidating at first because I wasn't necessarily planning on writing a book and publishing it. It was just for fun. And then after the fact, after I realized, oh my gosh, I just wrote a book, it sort of gives me that confidence to know, okay, well, I did it once, so I can do it again, right?
Right, exactly.
There, so.
Because some people I've talked to, they say about, they're intimidated by it, and I always say to them, a novel is nothing but a bunch of short stories that are tied together and put together, and you only write the short story at a clip. You don't write 100 pages.
Right.
You're doing 5, 10, 15 pages or whatever as you do it. 3 pages, whatever.
Yeah.
I never quite understood. I really loved what you said about the faucet piece because, there are days I can't write. And when I worked, I knew I couldn't write, so I did other things. And but there are the mindset that you're supposed to write every single day, and to me that would become like work and torture, because if it isn't flowing right, then I'm going to beat myself up.
Right.
And go, oh my God, this isn't right. Did there come a point when you were writing it that you go, oh my God, I better let somebody look at this? Or you would, because if you're doing it like a hobby, I guess it didn't matter so much. But at some point, you got to let the baby be exposed.
That's it.
Right?
And it's terrifying. Terrifying. But
it's true.
I did, my mom read it as I was going through it. And of course, my mom said, "Oh, this is wonderful. You're the best writer ever." And of course I thought, well, of course she's going to say that it's my mom. But at the same time, it felt good. It helped me, I thought, okay, hey, Mommy likes it, so I'll just keep going. But, yeah, at first it was terrifying. Absolutely terrifying.
And then did somebody at some point other than your mother read it before you went to go publish?
My dad did. He loved it too, by the way.
Well, let's hope so. Dads and little girls, I mean.
Yes. There were some steamy parts, though, because, the romance, he thought, oh, dear God, this is my daughter writing this. This is not okay. But, no, he loved it. I'm not sure. I'm trying to remember. I honestly don't think I even had that many people outside of immediate family and, very close friends read it. So naturally, they're obligated, because they love me, they're obligated to tell me, oh, you're awesome, you're the best writer ever. But it wasn't until, I almost was too terrified to let anyone else read it until I just released it. Which is probably, hindsight, that was pretty stupid of me, because I probably could have set myself up for some pretty negative feedback, and then I probably would have, gone and cried my eyes out. But, it's been a great experience. So. Yeah.
No. I mean, I haven't read your book, but you have some really good reviews on there.
Thank you.
So whatever you did, it means you must have a natural talent.
I guess so.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So, when I was looking through for agents, I had found this guy. I don't know if you were exposed to Writer's Digest at all, but I had looked there because that book was around. I was buying those books in the 1980s because I was getting ready to write and just didn't have the time. But this one agent out of the Southwest had said, before you contact him, you need to send your manuscript to everyone who hates you.
Oh, gosh.
And find out, and if it passes their muster, then you can consider sending it to me.
Oh.
And I just cracked up because, the agent really works for you.
Right.
If you're the talent, his salary is all dependent on you.
That's right.
So if you were really talented, why would you ever go near this guy?
Uh-huh.
It'd be like, oh, my God, he's going to be cracking a whip over top of me.
Yeah.
And that was one of the reasons, too, that I decided just to bypass the agents. I was getting some positive feedback on them, but it wasn't quite in their genre. I don't even know what genre I fit in at all because, it's spiritual. It's people want to call it religious, but it's really not.
Yeah.
And there's a love story between this archangel and the first human female set amongst all this other stuff. So anyway, when I saw this stuff with the agents, I was going, I've written really complex contracts, so I can read it better than anybody. So I'll just go right to the publishers, and that's what I did. But now you went to self-publishing.
I did.
So why don't you describe that a little bit? Because I'm sure there's people listening who, are working on a book and don't know, even how to approach that process.
Well, and I'll tell you why I did. Of course, once I decided that, okay, I'm going to let my baby out to the world. You refer to it as baby, and that's exactly what it is. And I decided, okay, I'm going to do this. I researched both sides of the coin. I researched the traditional publishing and the self-publishing. And, I'm not one to get advice from a skinny chef. I'm gonna look for the ones that know what they're talking about. And some of my absolute favorite authors who are very successful, they are on the best-selling list on Amazon, the New York Times bestsellers, the USA Today bestsellers, and they did it indie. They're indie writers or indie authors or self-published. And, of course, they get asked the question all the time, well, why did you go self-published? And so I just ate it up. Every little tidbit that I could find from these amazingly successful writers, I ate it up. So a lot of them, they sort of had these bullet points of, traditional versus self-published, which is the way to go. And one of them, of course, that's always brought up is the partnership. A lot of the traditional publishing routes would venture to say, well, you get partnered up with a major publishing house. Why wouldn't you choose that? Whereas then these self-published authors would argue back, what kind of partner, quote unquote,
right,
do you want to partner up with if they take over 100% of the control of the book? You're left with zero. You hand it over to them. You hand over your baby to these, guys who don't care. They don't really care about your baby that you just created, you birthed over 18 months. And
right.
Then in return, they'll give you 10% of the profits, 15% if you're lucky, that you have to share with your agent if you have an agent.
Right.
And so you're left with, 10% of the pie. Whereas the self-published authors made the best-selling list, and they get 70% of the pie. They cut out all those middlemen.
Right.
So that's one thing. Sure, the partnership could be beneficial, but, is it really the partnership that you want to have? Speaking of money, and I know everyone says, don't publish a book expecting to get rich, because we're artists. I mean, we don't do it for the money. We do it for the pleasure of the craft of writing. But at the same time, I'm not really allergic to money either, right? I mean, I'm not going to turn it away. So if I can get 70%, I'm going to get 70%. That was my choice.
Right.
So speaking of money, the traditional, another bullet point that these self-published authors brought up was the advances. A lot of the traditional houses, the publishing houses, would offer somebody like me, had I queried, sent all those query letters to either an agent or like you did directly to the publisher, somebody like me, what I learned, a nobody from nowhere,
right,
with no social presence, no following, nothing to my name that anyone would recognize. Oh, Elizabeth Wyke, yeah, she's, she did this and that and this and that. Of course I'm going to buy her book. They'd probably offer me maybe $5,000, as an advance. And from what I heard from these other sources, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but typically, on average, you don't get a dime of royalty until you reach that, until the royalties reach that advance payout.
Absolutely. That's always the way that works.
Okay, and then another, I guess the average, or the statistically speaking, 20% of books today that are published through the traditional houses will actually earn out that advance.
Right.
So that was 80% chance that I'm never going to get another dime over that advance. The advance that I'm actually sharing with my agent. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
exactly.
For me, that was easy. I thought, well, what I need is time. Distributing with a traditional publisher, it gets me into Barnes & Noble, some of the stores, not all of them. Gets me in there. But Barnes & Noble is a business. They have their own butts to cover, so they'll give you 4 to 6 weeks on the shelf. And if you're not selling, if not enough customers in your niche genre come in and purchase your book, your nobody from nowhere book, they're going to pull it. And then you're left, twiddling your thumbs. So
you're on a closeout rack. Closeout rack.
If that, they might not even put you there. They might just, ship you back.
Right.
So, I don't know. For me, it was easier to see the big picture, that what a nobody from nowhere like me needs is time. Of course, it's not going to happen overnight. Self-publishing is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And you realize that probably the best form of any kind of marketing is word of mouth, period.
Right.
And that's if you're published or self-published, of course. If your friend tells you, hey, this book is awesome, you need to read it, what's your friend going to do? They're going to buy the book.
Right.
So if I can get enough friends talking about my book one way or another, eventually, we're going, And here with self-published, like I said, it's not overnight, but I do get a check every month through, Amazon and different publishers that I have it on. It's not that $5,000 advance that I got, but it's growing. Each month it's growing because I'm giving it time. It's not, I didn't have the cutoff at 4 weeks or 6 weeks. There's time.
Right.
So, and then whenever it does sell, bada bing, bada boom, I get a bigger piece of the pie, and I'm from Oklahoma. I like pie. So I want pie, right? So, I don't know. That was just, for me, it made sense, that nobody from nowhere needs time one way or another. Self-publishing gives me the time it takes to actually form a name,
Right.
That's it.
Well, I think that's the wonderful thing today is because Amazon, whatever, they're not clearing out books that don't sell. You're up there for extended periods of time.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not a tremendous investment. I mean, even my books from my publisher, they're print on demand. So it's not like there's a warehouse sitting that they've got to dispose of the books. And I know some people who've gone the traditional route, but, big publishers, whatever it is. And generally they rely on the author to do all their own promotional and marketing stuff.
You're doing it either way. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you're doing the work anyway.
Yeah.
And then you always have that danger that they do a run and the books don't sell, and then they're discarded or whatever they do, or they're shipped back to the author, you know. And I had some exposure to the music business at one point. And they loved that advanced stuff. The bands are getting all this money, and then the albums didn't sell, and then it was the end of them.
Yeah.
And so for somebody who hasn't been educated in this field, I'm quite impressed that you have this all so well reasoned out.
Well, that's me though. I have to.
But that's a good thing.
Have to research. I have to think. Okay, what's this side of the coin look like, and what's the other side, and it just was a no-brainer for me. So.
And then today with all the social media outlets, I mean, there's so many ways. I say all the time is that we're in everybody's living room.
That's it.
The problem is everybody is in everybody's living room.
Yeah.
So then that's the part that you kind of have to work through to get above the other thing. And I'm a firm believer that it is a marathon. It's not. It's not the race to the swiftest. And when you look back at anybody who's really, really made it big, it always takes time. These people they think are overnight successes aren't overnight successes. They've been working at it, And I love the example of Wayne Dyer. When he started, he was driving around with his books in the trunk of his car, selling them as he would go from place to place. Because, of course, you didn't have the advantage of what the Internet is. And look where he's wound up.
Yeah, it's amazing. That's one thing with the paperback world now. I mean, years ago, you couldn't print on demand. What's that? It wasn't really around. But now, any book in the world, anybody in the world can have a paperback. My paperback book looks awesome. It's amazing. I was so impressed with the quality that, I did it through CreateSpace, which is, for those that don't know, it's like a daughter company, I guess, of Amazon. And they have, you upload your book, you do formatting, which is challenging if you don't. I'll confess, it was challenging at first to format it. But once it's done, it's done. They have the file, and anybody in the world can just go click add to cart, and a couple days have your paperback book in hand, and it looks awesome. The quality is top notch. I love that. I love that my garage is not filled with 3,000 copies of my book that I'm trying to sell out of the back of my trunk.
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, years ago, they had to do mechanicals where it was like typesetting, and that was a whole complex kind of process. You had to proofread the mechanicals before they would do the print, and then if the cover had more than one color, then that was a whole other process, and the only way it became cost-effective, that's why the runs were always around 5,000 copies, there was no way you'd do one. Because it would cost you probably $100,000 for the one. So, you know, that's why I think we're living at a time that, you know, the ability to do this is really just so great, you know.
Absolutely.
And that's why I try to encourage people. If they think they can write a book,
do it.
You know, go, do it.
That's
you know?
Do it.
And if it isn't right, then you can either correct it or do it. You know, sometimes you got to learn, you know, by doing. And then you just write something else. I don't know how you are, but you know, once I started, it was like, you know, I probably have 10 novels in my head right now outside of the Archangels. You know, it's like I don't have the time to be able to just spit it out fast enough.
I know. I'm in the same boat. I absolutely have to keep a writing journal with me at all times. At all times. And I have different, you know, files per se, different documents in this writing journal that, you know, I have a writing journal on my phone because I have my phone with me all the time, which is another awesome technology that we have now that we didn't have years ago. You know, I don't have like a notebook attached to my hip. I have my phone. So I keep, you know, I have all these, like you said, there's dozens of storylines, and I'll be thinking about that storyline, or something will pique my interest, like, oh, that's going to fit with this storyline, so I'll go and take a note of it so I don't forget it the next day.
Right.
So, yeah, that's it.
So maybe we go into some of your experience in doing the social media stuff, because that becomes, you know, some people, they write the book and they figure that's going to be it.
No, that's not it.
It's not it at all.
No.
I mean, in some ways, it's almost like the real work begins.
That's it. I was going to say the same thing. People have said, okay, so I wrote, you know, they've contacted me like, yay, I wrote this book. And I'm like, yay, applaud. That's awesome. Congratulations. And now the real work begins. You know, it's like, now you're really going to see what it's like to get yourself out there. And for me, is it for you, but for me, I have the hardest time kind of, you know, promoting myself. It's hard to sell myself and tell the world, oh, you need to read my book because it's awesome. You know, I mean, how do you do that tactfully? You can't. It's hard. So
the only thing I have to say is that, you know, I don't know how you are with it, but for me, I put so much in these books, and I feel that I'm happy with them. It's not like I cringe and I go, ooh. You know, sometimes I had to write law briefs, and it was like, oh, I'm on the losing side of this argument. You know, this is not going to go well. But there's like, it's almost like I have a veil of grace about the whole thing. And it's like, you know what? This is, you know, I've decided this is what I'm going to do. So if I'm going to do it, I've got to take the ego out of it. And just do, you know, if I fall flat on my face, I fall flat on my face. Yeah. And it's like, okay, I'll try this or I'll try that to get the thing out and known, you know.
Well, you know what is really helping with that is the blogging world. With the romance genre, it's huge right now. It's absolutely huge. Back in the day when I was in high school, I was the bookworm. My friends were not. In college, I was still the bookworm. My friends were not. But now with e-book readers, everybody has a Kindle, or everybody has the free Kindle app or the Nook app on their phone, and everybody's reading now. You know, and I kind of give a lot of credit to the movies that have been around lately. With the romance genre, you have Twilight and The Hunger Games and Divergent, and now soon to be the 50 Shades of Grey trilogy. These movies have turned people onto reading, and they realize I can have a book with me everywhere I go. It can be in the doctor's office, and I can read a book on my Kindle app on my phone. So the whole market for reading I think, is bigger now than ever. And with the romance genre, what we have is, and I'm sure every genre probably has their own, but I'm really familiar with the romance genre because that's what I write. So there's all of these book blogs, and so you'll have reviewers. You'll have one reviewer for a blog, or you'll have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 reviewers for one blog, and they will read a book. They'll review it. They'll say what they'll kind of give a synopsis of what the story entails, and then they'll give you their opinion of it, good or bad. You really like the good ones because they help sell your book. But so then they'll have their own following. You know, they'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 15,000 fans on Facebook, and they're following these reviews that they're posting, and then these readers are reading these books with them. So it's sort of, bloggers and authors can't really be one without the other. I mean, they both need each other in this world, and they both help each other, because without the books, the bloggers wouldn't have anything to write about and tell the world about. But then without the blogs, all of us indie writers wouldn't have any way of telling the world about our books. So we have, this this sort of relationship that is just, it's wonderful. I don't know how else to say it. It's just wonderful. And I've met so many just awesome blogs that are so helpful, and they go out of their way, literally, to help these self-published authors. And they tell, I've really started doing these, what's called a takeover. And so if you are an author, you can approach these blogs on their Facebook pages and ask them to do a Facebook takeover. And it's where you will take over this blog page, and you'll have the ability to connect with the fans of this page. And that's what these fans, what these readers are all about. And that's what I'm about, is the connecting and connecting and connecting and connecting. It's just so much fun. And, I mean, who doesn't want to know who the real person is behind the book? This person wrote this book, but what are they like in real life? Can we be friends? Can we relate on something else other than this book? So I'm having a blast with it. I'm having an absolute blast with it. It takes a lot of time. That's what we're saying, the work of it. It just takes a lot of time. But I have the time, because that
you have the small children. Yeah, of course. So, it's like a perfect fit.
Yeah, it works. It works. So it's fun.
It was like when they first approached me about the radio show, I was like, look, I got a lot of writing to do. I don't know if I have time for this, and blah, 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 blah. And then it was like, oh, my God, I can do a video or an audio blog without having to sit and write. And I can talk to people that are really interesting to me. Yeah. Because I really like people, and I like to hear different viewpoints and how somebody does something.
Right.
And to get authors on or whatever, because they have people that really want to know who you are. Mm-hmm. And what better than to listen to a conversation that you're having, about how you did whatever you've done, So I think it's just a wonderful time to be a writer. I mean, like you say, it's challenging because you got to work at it.
Mm-hmm. It's work. Yeah.
I probably work at this harder than I worked when I was working. Mm-hmm. I spend more time. Yeah. But as time goes on, everything starts to build.
That's
and the one guy I know, he was saying, well, like on Twitter, it's like unless you have 100,000 followers, it's really not going to help. And I think I had 6 at the time.
6 followers.
It was like, well, you know what? I could sit here and be bummed, or I can work at getting Twitter followers.
That's it. That's how you and I connected, isn't it? I think we connected on Twitter. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Love it.
And Facebook, you really can't contact people you don't know. They'll put you in Facebook jail. I've been in Facebook jail. Mm-hmm. And on Twitter you can, but you can't follow too many because then you go to Twitter jail. Uh-huh. So I've been there twice.
Oh, okay.
So
jailbird over here.
So much for a prosecutor. But you know what? We're almost out of time. So I'd like for you to give your website information for anybody who's going to be looking for you. So if you could do that for me.
Okay. So the website is www.elizabethwyke.com. ELIZABETHWYKE.com. That is my central hub for everything. You can connect with me through my Facebook page there, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram. It's all on there. And I love stalkers in the internet world, so come and stalk me. Come connect. I want to hear what you're reading so we can read together.
That's great. Yeah. Just hold on because I'm just going to do my end piece here. For those listening, I want to say thanks to our-truth.com, its sister stations, inkedradio.com, freedomrocksradio.com, way-cool-radio.com. That's for the spelling of cool. And you can find more information about me and my book series, The Archangel Jeremiel and the War to Conquer Heaven, at www.johnj-higgins.com. And the website for this radio show is www.hangingwithhiggins.com. And with that, that's all that we're going to do for tonight. So thanks for listening.